Well, if you're just joining us, I feel a little sorry for you because you've missed some magic here so far this morning. But I'm happy you're here now, and it looks a little magical behind me, I think. So I am going to be turning things over here to Peggy Darr, and I don't really have to do much more of an introduction because your slide has done a beautiful job of that. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Exciting to see the good crowd. Yeah, my name is Peggy Darr. I'm the New Mexico representative for Defenders of Wildlife. Defenders of Wildlife is a nationwide nonprofit dedicated to the preservation of all wildlife and their native habitats. And so today, to start off with, I'm a wildlife biologist. And so usually when I'm at conferences like this, I'm presenting on data. And so when I was looking through the request for presentations for BeaverCon, I saw the stories section and I thought, that's interesting. I have a story and I think it's kind of interesting. And I guess BeaverCon thought it was interesting as well, which is why I'm standing here on the stage. So I'm happy here. This is a little bit different for me. I'm not presenting data. I'm just talking about one of the most rewarding projects I've worked on in my approximate 20-year career so far. And so without further ado, I started thinking more about the importance of storytelling, especially in beaver conservation. And I think we probably all know this, but storytelling really helps in a lot of ways. It gives us hope. We, as practitioners, we see things that worked. It gives us stories to tell other people, to say, hey, this worked elsewhere, maybe it'll work here. And whenever I see stories, it gives me ideas of what to try in my future work. So I think stories are of particular importance for beaver conservation. Now, this story happens at the Los Potreros Open Space. It's owned by Santa Fe County. It's a small open space. It's only about 40 acres. But I like to say it packs a big punch. It's 40 acres of what is now, thanks to the beavers, a massive wet meadow and wetland complex that's only getting better as time goes on. Now, Los Potreros Open Space is magical in New Mexico, especially because we don't have a lot of water, and it's full of water and green all the time. It is located in the small village of Chimayo, which only has about 3,000 people, but it's actually a pretty famous place. I guess a show of hands, has anyone here been to Chimayo, Mexico? Yeah, so quite a few. So Chimayo is famous for the Santuario de Chimayo, which is a church, and it's a place where people go, Catholics go, and it's said to have healing dirt. And so people go there to request healing for their loved ones, themselves. And then during Holy Week, about 300,000 people from New Mexico make a pilgrimage. It's one of the largest Catholic pilgrimages in the world, I think, or at least in the country. And they pilgrimage and they walk up to the Santuario from sometimes as far as Albuquerque. So during Holy Week, you'll see a lot of people sometimes carrying crosses, etc. So it's a very famous place, and Los Potreros Open Space is actually the backdrop to the Santuario. So when you stand there at this very famous New Mexico historical, cultural landmark, you're looking at this. And so as you can see, this is actually one of the beaver dams at Los Potreros Open Space. They created what I like to call a beaver infinity pool. So you can see that, you can see the dam, hopefully along the side there. That goes down about 5 feet, and they created this big U-shaped wetland. And behind it, there's a bunch of wet meadows that they had also helped work on. So we've already talked a lot in this conference about the benefits of beavers. Presenters have talked about fire hazard mitigation, cleaning the water, cleaning out nitrates, slowing down floodwaters. But the one that I want to talk about today is increased biodiversity. Now, usually when you are doing a project like this, and you don't unfortunately have the time or money to monitor for every type of species out there, invertebrates, etc., you have to assume that you're doing something good, that what is supposed to happen is happening. And it's rare that you actually see physical positive results from your work unless you're actually looking for it. Now, anecdotally, we saw all sorts of increases. We had boreal chorus frogs out there. We started to see and hear what we thought were a lot more. We started to get more wetland birds and waterfowl. We had breeding waterfowl. We had night herons. We had rails. We started to get water snakes. Bat diversity was very high. And then we had fish in one of the rivers. The Los Potreros Open Space is at the confluence of two rivers, the Rio Quemado and the Santa Cruz. And the Rio Quemado, while it's classified as perennial, it actually has been running dry during early spring, which is the dry time in New Mexico, for many, many years. And so with the introduction of beaver, we all of a sudden started seeing fish. I cannot tell you what fish they are. Unfortunately, I am trained mostly in ornithology, so I can tell you all the birds that are out there, but I know there were fish and there weren't fish there before. That's what I can tell you. So lots of, and of course, willows and cottonwoods started just jumping up everywhere. But I know what we're here to talk about today are fireflies. So show of hands, how many people here are originally from the East Coast? I am too, I'm from Vermont. And then how many people here are from the West Coast originally? Okay. So in Vermont, I was used to seeing fireflies, at least when I grew up. Unfortunately, you don't see them much there anymore now. That's very sad. But in New Mexico, I've lived in New Mexico for 10 years, and I had never seen a firefly. And we were out there, after the beavers had moved in, we were out there doing frog surveys at night. And I had a colleague say, hey, there's a firefly. I was like, what? Because I had never seen a firefly in New Mexico, very rare in New Mexico. And she was like, oh, that's rare? Like, yes, indeed, that is very rare. Looked up, saw them flashing above us, several of them. Contacted a firefly expert who came out, and this is the actual firefly, one of them. It was released unharmed. They have to capture them. The firefly experts informed me they had to capture them to properly identify them. So they captured it, and it's part of a new species that is currently still being described by biologists. It's in the Photorus genus, but of course it doesn't have a scientific name yet. They're unofficially calling it the Rio Grande thrasher or flasher. Kind of an interesting name. Yeah, I always get laughs out of that name. I think maybe they should reconsider that. But so they're calling it the Rio Grande flasher, and it is found in only a few places so far along the Rio Grande, and the Chimayo is the highest elevation it's been found thus far. And I should have looked this up before the presentation, but I think Chimayo is around 7,000 feet or so. It's lower down than Santa Fe, which is about 8,000. So it was such a big deal that it actually made the front page above the fold of the Santa Fe New Mexican newspaper. And you can see that beavers got a nice shout out. Rare firefly spotted in Chimayo area, aided by beavers, protected from cattle. So really great publicity for beavers there. Now, before I talk more about fireflies, I want to talk about all of the work that we did to get to that point. As you've probably been seeing in presentations, we didn't just go from beavers moved in, yay, fireflies showed up, woohoo. These are beavers that we're talking about in a traditional Hispanic farming community. And as you can imagine, the perspective that many people there had on beavers was not positive. So there were a lot of growing pains between beavers moving in and fireflies. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this. So this is a picture. So when beavers first moved into the open space, one thing we had working with us, for us, is that Santa Fe County Open Spaces, it is illegal per county ordinance to harass or kill any wildlife. That includes beavers. So we did have that law behind us, but of course, laws don't stop people from doing bad things a lot of times, unfortunately. So we had people come onto the property and rip out several dams. And we started hearing grumbling about people being upset about the beavers being here in the community because the community is a traditional acequia farming community. And I don't know how many people here know what acequia farming is, so a few. So it's a Spanish legacy, and it has been around for a very long time in northern New Mexico since the Spaniards arrived. It's basically a form of irrigation with ditches that divert water from main river channels and can send them out to crop fields and to water animals. And so there are several what we call ditch headgates, or where water comes off the river on the open space. And the members of the acequia have the right to go into the open space and manage their acequia headgates. And so they were concerned about all the misconceptions of beavers, that beavers were going to take water away from them. They were concerned about cutting down of some of the large trees that we had out there. So we decided we had to be proactive. And so we had 2 public meetings on site, and most of the attendees were actually acequia farmers. And it was a collaboration, a really nice collaboration between Defenders of Wildlife, Santa Fe County staff, Rio Grande Return, which is a really wonderful NGO that we have that works on all sorts of great beaver work. And we, first and foremost, listened to people's concerns. We wanted to hear what they were concerned about, and then we told them how we were going to address those concerns. But instead of telling them, here's all the things that beavers will do for you, because people in this community their families have been in this community forever, and they don't take kindly to outsiders such as myself coming in and telling them what they should expect to see. So instead of saying, you should see this, we asked them, will you give us 1 year to see what happens? Here's what we think will happen. We think the Rio Quemado will start running year-round again. We think you'll start getting a more reliable source of water. And we don't think there will be any flooding issues. And we will fence off some of the larger trees to protect those. And so they said, oh, okay, we'll see what these crazy people want in a year. And so a year went by. We installed several flow devices in some of the ponds, not all of them. This one's right next to several houses that are unfortunately in the floodplain. So those people actually really love the beavers and would go swimming in this pond. I'm not sure I would have, but they went swimming in it. And this worked quite well. So we put in flow devices. I don't have a picture of it, but we caged some trees, but left most trees for the beavers to do their good work. And then the beavers, let me back up here a second. So this, you can see the meadow out in the back here. And the beavers had created not only a bunch of ponds, but a bunch of canals all through the wetlands. So they were going from river to river with canals and wetlands connecting the whole thing. And so this is the wet meadow, and you can see on the left, that was before beavers came in, and then on the right, beavers coming in. And so the creation of firefly habitat, I'm not a firefly expert, but what the experts told me was that fireflies need permanent standing water, which we didn't have before, definitely had after. They need an area where you don't have, and so the beavers obviously provided that. They don't have a lot of data to support this, but they believe that fireflies can't coexist with cattle grazing, or at least much cattle grazing. And that's because the larvae of fireflies spend 1 or several years living in the soil, eating aquatic invertebrates. And so that's not really compatible with a lot of hooves squishing them. And so this was another growing pains, our neighbor cows were constantly getting onto the property. And after a lot of conversations and then unfortunately letters from county attorneys, finally we got to a agreement where his cattle would not come onto the property. You know, I mentioned attorneys, but I'm happy to say now that actually the county and this landowner have a good relationship. So so the cattle were taken off the property finally, and water came in, and fireflies arrived. Now, other benefits, so we had, when we first did the public meetings, there was a lot of skepticism. You know, it was a little uncomfortable. But they came, you know, they were open, they came, they asked questions, and they agreed to give us some time to see what happened. And after a year, the same landowners that we believe were ripping out beaver dams were actually I didn't prompt them, were saying all the positive things that beavers do to other people while I was standing there. It was one of the highlights of my career to hear this farmer say this, and telling them all the good things they do and saying, you know, I like beaver. Beavers are okay. I like beavers. And so, you know, farmers straight out said, I'm seeing more water. The neighboring farmer who grazed cattle said that it was the first year that he didn't have to supplementally feed his water because the groundwater, the water tables rose. And so we created some beaver believers, and we're now hoping to use those beaver believers to help convince other members of the community of the positive impacts of beavers. And so that's where, so this one beaver colony that came in and we fought hard to coexist with and protect, they are still there doing their good work. This last picture is actually one of the beavers from our wildlife camera. So that's one of our guys or gals. And so this spawned the idea of a watershed, an entire watershed-based restoration. And so you can see Chimayo there in the middle. Chimayo is again at the confluence of the Rio Quemado and the Santa Cruz. And there's one of those, what did they call it? It was called, earlier they called them beads. So it's a bead. It's a big, open, flat, wet meadow that was probably a beaver complex at some point, and beavers are reclaiming it. And so this is a very interesting landscape, and we decided to try to do something that is a bit ambitious, and I know it's ambitious because sometimes it keeps me up at night with stress, but you know, nothing good ever comes easy. So earlier yesterday, there was some talk about, you know, it is easier to do restoration in the upper watersheds on public land, and that's true. But I also think that in order to get where we need to be with beaver conservation, both having communities understand the importance of beavers, and we need to have beavers in everywhere possible in New Mexico with climate change. We need to work in rivers like this that have quite a few people at the lower end, but at the higher end in the headwaters, it is Forest Service land, but the Forest Service land is way too high and steep. As you come down the Rio Quemado, you hit the Truchas Land Grant, which is also another thing that can be unique in New Mexico or the Southwest. We still have land grants, communally owned land that was awarded by the Spanish to settlers. So we have the Truchas Land Grant, which is private property. It goes through several small communities, Cordova, Chimayo. It flows through a bunch of private land, and then it ends there on the left in Espanola on the Santa Clara Pueblo Native American Reservation. And so there's a broad range of land ownership and people that are living along this river. And so what we're trying to do is, our goal, and I hope we reach it, is we want to create stepping stones for beavers all along the river corridor so that the beavers that are there. We know we have beavers coming from the Rio Grande trying to come up in Espanola. They don't make it very far. We know we have beavers in Chimayo. We know we have beavers up in the upper watershed. But they have a hard time making it through all of the people that are in there that may not love beavers. And so we've done a few things. We hired a local farmer, Emilio Borrego. He's amazing. He knows a lot about farming and also is very excited about helping his community understand the importance of beavers. So we have hired him, and he goes out and he talks to people about beavers and coexistence. Another thing we're doing is we're collaborating with the New Mexico Land Conservancy. And on these private landowner tracts, as a potential incentive for help allowing us to do restoration work, and by restoration work I mean process-based restoration with beaver dam analogs, et cetera, that we want to offer to pay for the costs of putting in a conservation easement. So that can be rather expensive. So pay to have the conservation easement put in place. The landowners receive only the financial benefits, and the conservation easement not only protects and allows the restoration, but it protects beavers. And so we want to have a more long-term protection of our stepping stones. And so that's our goal. We have 4 years of the project, and I hope maybe in 4 years I hope to stand here and tell you what a great success it is and how many private landowners we changed their minds. It's not going to be easy, but I think it's really necessary to try this and to put the work into it. So so lessons learned really quickly. I saw I had 5 minutes. I wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions. A few lessons learned: be proactive. As soon as people ripped out dams, we scheduled public meetings and we talked to people and we asked them what their concerns were. And I think that was key in getting in nipping that in the bud, so to speak, early on. Listen. We did not go into those meetings talking first. We listened first. So we wanted to know their concerns, and then we addressed those concerns. Follow through. We made it a priority to do what we said we were going to do. And if a landowner called and said, I have an issue with a beaver, we were there that day fixing the concern. And then give people a chance to experience the changes firsthand. Again, we just ask people, please, can you do us this favor? Can you wait a year and see what happens? And no matter who it is, people, when they see that, they're open to changing their perceptions about beavers. And so give them the chance to experience it firsthand. And with that, I think I have a few minutes for questions, if anyone has questions. I have 3 minutes for questions. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah. What is Defenders of Wildlife? Like, what's your project area or scope or whatever? Yeah, so Defenders of Wildlife is a nationwide NGO, but we do have a Southwest program, so that includes New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas. So I'm the New Mexico representative, so I cover conservation programs in New Mexico. And I would say about a third of my time is devoted to beaver coexistence. If you visit, we have a sponsor table. If you visit our table, you'll see we have a beaver coexistence cost share program where we help landowners pay to live with beavers. We pay a minimum of 50%. We can pay up to 100%. We ask people to just give us an honest assessment of what they can provide and go from there. And so I also, as you can see, we're now working on trying to do active restoration. And we also, Defenders of Wildlife also has an iBeaver, wasn't started by me, but has a community science app where we ask people to submit their sightings about beavers. So, and then beaver conservation is happening in other states for defenders as well. So our Rocky Mountains office and then our Colorado office or California office wants to start doing stuff. So hopefully we'll be expanding our beaver coexistence work to other offices throughout the US, but we do have offices and people throughout most of the US. Are you working with Santa Clara Pueblo? Yes. We are indeed. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Yeah, the Santa Clara Pueblo is great. They've been a really great partner. They have called us out there for beaver coexistence before this project started, and we are both very excited to work with each other. Of course, all of this was their ancestral land, but we're hoping that we can provide a lot more water for the Pueblo down at the bottom through this. I don't remember who is next. Anna Walker with the Albuquerque Biopark. Yeah, so she's she's a firefly expert. I can't remember what she's on right now, but she does fireflies all the time. Who is next? I'm sorry, I don't. Oh, okay. Sorry. I guess that's it for questions, but you can put them in the app and I can answer them. Thank you.